Welcome to SoulSchool. I'm Theolyn, and this is the first in my series about angelic realms. I'm going to start by telling you some personal stuff. Quite often when I meet people, they ask me, how did you get into talking about angels? What started you on your journey? So, for the record, I'll say something about that now. It's quite a long story, actually. But I'll try and give you the bare bones, because I think it will encourage you to realise that you could communicate with angels and other entities, actually. Let's start with the angels. So, first of all, I have to say I didn't have a religious background. I lived with a mother and a stepfather, neither of whom had any interest in churches. They didn't have a Bible in the house. They had lots of very good poetry, but no Bible. I did go to a church school, so when I was a little girl, I came across the Nativity story and the Archangel Gabriel, like most children do. And because I went to a church school, they often took the children to the local church. And the local church was very attractive. It was in the Cotswolds, Oxfordshire, in England. And the colour of the stone of the building, when the sun was shining on it, was magical. And I was really taken by the interior of the building, with the altar and the beautiful cloths and embroidery on the altar cloths. So I liked the ambience of a religious building, even though I wasn't being brought up in a religion of any kind. Some people in my family were interested in theosophy. So when I was quite small, I did come across books about theosophical ideas. One of my aunts had quite a number of famous books by Madame Blavatsky and Alice Bailey. I must have been 9, 10, 11 when I saw those kind of books. But none of those prepared me for angels. They did mention devas. And of course, devas are a very similar idea to angels. I'll talk about those in a later episode. So you can see that when I was young, I didn't have any training. I wasn't one of these kind of children who went around the countryside seeing angelic beings and conversing with them when I was little. I did think a lot about fairies because I lived in the countryside. And when I was out walking on my own, as you could do in those days, I felt a sense of magic in the air. When I was very young, I used to climb out of the bedroom window because we were in a bungalow. And I used to look in the garden for fairies on a moonlit night. I never saw any. I knew they were hiding from me, but I did not see fairies, and I did not see angels when I was little. Also living in that very rural area, I was very much aware of the beauty of the sky at night and the stars. And I think that did have a profound effect for me, of feeling that there was an expansive arena of a beauty in the universe that we could hardly imagine because it was so far away. But these twinkling stars in the night could possibly have something to say to us, just as we could, if we listened carefully, hear the messages from the plants, the trees, the flowers. And I felt it was there, even though at that age, I was a young teenager, I was becoming more interested in the things young teenagers get interested in, as you can imagine. So I was reading a lot of books, but I was not thinking about angels at all. When I got a bit older, I became interested in Buddhism. After all, Buddhism, it seemed to me, was a very sensible kind of religion. It didn't say there was an old man up in the sky who was going to wag his finger at you if you did something naughty. I didn't know at the time that Buddhism does have its own invisible beings. I thought it was something much purer than that, just simple. So I was in the Buddhist Society from the age of about 14. And then as I got a bit older, I did become interested in some of the Christian stuff. And I liked the Christian churches, partly, I think, because of the windows, the glass windows, the beauty of those buildings, and the sense of reverence and stillness that you could get if you went into one of those places. And that was especially true for me when I was moved to London in my mid-teens, because from the beauty and stunning silence and stillness of the countryside, I was hurtled into the busy life that you have when you live in London. You have to go on all the buses and the tubes and so on. So I would often go from my parents' flat across the road to a big Roman Catholic church, just because I wanted that sense of peace and stillness that I found there. So all these things that I'm telling you are adding up to the fact that, naturally, from quite small, I did have mystical tendencies, you could say, whether it was kind of nature mysticism or the kind of mysticism that you would find in a church where there were candles and windows and incense and so forth, that kind of mysticism. But I still didn't think about angels, and I still didn't think about guardian angels. Nobody told me about them. So I won't go into all my personal stuff, but I did become a single mother for several years, and that was quite a stressful kind of lifestyle. And that meant that I was looking through the Buddhism and the Eastern traditions for a kind of meditation. So in my late 20s, I learned transcendental meditation, and that had a very profound effect on my consciousness. I had some very, very beautiful experiences with it, which I'm always hoping I can help other people get to as well. Now, to jump forward a bit, when I was a bit older than that, let's say in my mid to late 30s, I then went back to the meditation teachers, transcendental meditation, and learnt a very advanced technique. They call them siddhis. And I think that was what triggered me to have these much more unexpected experiences, because the Bhagavad Gita and the TM movement don't particularly talk about angels. But what these advanced techniques do claim is that if you focus on something, you will know it. So it's like if you, when you're meditating, put your attention on something, doesn't matter what it is, another person perhaps, or a planet, you will get to know it in a way. You will make some kind of reciprocal contact at an invisible level. And one of the siddhis we learned said, concentrate on the stars, the sun, the moon, the planets, and get to know them. So that, among some other suggestions that they had, was what I was working with inwardly in my meditations for quite a few months. And then something rather extraordinary happened during a meditation. I quite suddenly, and quite startling it was, I had a picture arise in my mind on what I call the inner television screen. Right? It's more like a cinema screen, because it's almost as though the picture has been there waiting for you, and then the curtains open. Ta-da! Here's the new movie. Here is something for you to see. And there was an angel. And this angel was really unusual, because it was walking on planet Earth in the fields, and it had the wings, and it had a halo, and it was carrying an olive branch. And in the other hand, it was carrying a blue crystal. And by its feet was a little lamb. And around its feet were all these flowers. It was just breathtaking. And I didn't want to give up my meditation, because I didn't want to stop looking at this amazing image. Later, I discovered for myself through books I was reading that this was very likely, and I was quite sure, actually, when I read about it. It was an angel called Sandalphon, of whom I had never heard. I'd heard of Gabriel, I'd heard of Raphael, I'd heard of Michael, but that was about it. So that vision of Sandalphon coming up in my mind, in my meditation, quite uncalled for by me consciously, was the first step for me for investigating how I could experience the reality on the invisible level of the archangels. I think that might be enough for this episode. I'll come back shortly and make another one, and perhaps talk about, well, what is an angel anyway? Goodbye for now. See you soon.